So, Sean, it's good to get you back on. Your last episode was incredibly popular in the sense of that it just kept growing and growing and growing. You had some people that were maybe more first, initially known to my audience who just had bang, they got loads of listens. Yours just continue to grow, which showed that what we were talking about really, really resonated with people. And it's good to get on to talk about something that's now sort of your new passion and new venture, and something that I know that I've struggled with and many other people struggle with, and that's sort of money and the relationship with money. And so before we sort of get into that, for anyone who hasn't checked out the first episode, and obviously you do continue to do a lot of stuff on a regular basis, remind people like who you are, what you're currently doing, and what, who is Sean Croxton?
Oh, hey, what did we talk about the last time? I forget.
It was how the brain affects your health. So it's sort of like about how mind affects your choice with food and things like that. And then we delved into the mindset stuff about it a little bit then.
All right. I know that was a while back.
It was my first ever podcast. Like I had to repurpose it years later, and I was like, I was nervous and I was stuttery. Because I said I followed you at the time. I was 9 years of following you since your YouTube stuff, and now what we must be now 10, 11 years of following your work. So yeah, it's a lot of change since then.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. A lot of change for both of us. Who am I? I'm Sean Croxton. I'm a very curious guy who likes to read books and learn things and talk about things that nobody else is talking about, and kind of get to the root cause of why people are getting the results that they're getting. And so several years ago, I was a health blogger and video blogger and health coach and podcaster and all that stuff. Decided to move on from that space and get into more of the personal development, self-help mindset with a focus on like neuroscience, brain science. And I started teaching people how their relationship with money and the coding or wiring of their brain was having an impact on their ability to generate more income. So I did that for several years. Now I'm still doing some of that, but what I'm mostly doing is helping online entrepreneurs, especially coaches, to identify their hidden mindset blocks so they can become more confident, so they can be seen and heard and stand out in what's usually a very crowded niche.
I think it's very interesting you speak about very early on about how much you like to read books. And that's something that's it's always been very apparent in your work. There's always a book that you'll bring up. There's always something that you're studying or learning, and looking at your career and how it's sort of like gone from the health market and you've sort of developed as you've gone. It's clear that when you've got your mindset on something, you look at mastering your craft. And I was listening to one of your podcasts today about how to make more money, and you saying about mastering your craft being the big thing. So before we delve into sort of like money specifically, one of the big things if someone wants to improve this is improving their financial literacy. And you read so much. I know so many people, myself included, struggle with getting into a good sort of reading habit. How is the importance of reading for you? How has that transformed your business and your life and how you view things? And how do you sort of help people start with either a reading habit or getting into personal development in any field?
So, I mean, reading itself, I mean, the more information you have, I think the better you're going to be at something. The other day on the podcast, I talked about the law of compensation, which decrees that the amount of money that you earn will always be an exact ratio to the need for what you do or the desire for what you do. Also your ability to do it and the difficulty in replacing you, right? And so I feel like in order to improve your ability to do something, you have to take in information. You're going to have to develop that skill. And developing that skill is going to be through reading, taking workshops, as well as your personal experience. And so I find that, unfortunately, many people aren't willing to take the time and sit down and read. And that probably has a lot to do with the association of reading with school. A lot of people didn't like school. They had to read boring textbooks. And so they're like, oh, I don't want to do any reading. But, I'm not sure how you're going to get better at your craft if you're not reading. And reading to me is so fascinating because, again, at school, they had you reading boring textbooks, but as an adult, you get to read whatever you want to read. And there's some really exciting information out there that can really help you and also help others at the same time. And so I'm a big fan of it. There's thousands of books in my brain. Some of it's conscious, a lot of it's unconscious. But if I, consider, like sometimes I think about like what I knew 5 or 6 years ago when it came to personal development and just my awareness of me and why I do the things I do and what my beliefs are and such and such. To think 6 years ago how bare the shelves were in my brain. You know what I'm saying? Just like and the way I was thinking and the way I was feeling and the way I was behaving and my lack of awareness back then. And due to all of the books I've read, I'm in a completely different place. Like I don't even know who that person was anymore. And so that's a choice. You can operate from kind of not in a bad way, ignorant place where you just don't really know a lot of stuff, right? Or you can operate from a place of like being well educated and having a different understanding of yourself as well as others. And I believe, to get to your second point, that my reading and the books that I read and the books that I recommend and the way that I teach them makes people go, oh, I'm probably going to pick up that book. Why am I going to pick up that book? Because the way Sean explained it showed that there's something in it for me. Like there's something that I can get better at and change and transform in my life from further investigating what he's talking about through the book that he recommended. And so I've encouraged a lot of people to read. I've gotten a lot of people to read. People tell me all the time, like, I didn't start reading books, outside of school until I started listening to you. So I'm really happy to be able to pass that on.
Do you think, like, because there's lots of ways of digesting information, reading someone that seems a lot of people struggle with more. And last time on the show, we talked about meditation and how important that was and how I didn't do it enough. And do you think reading's in that same realm, that because life moves so quickly, it's difficult for people to slow down enough to take a book, and take in a book rather than watch a video or something like that? Do you think that's part of the issue with this?
It could be. I also just think that people aren't willing to put in the time. I mean, to be honest, they're just, I always say, man, if you read 10 pages a day, that's 3,650 pages a day. That's a lot of books. That's probably 15 or so books a year that you can read if you just took 15 minutes out of your day to read. Again, it's association. It's how people feel about reading because they were taught to feel a certain way about reading during the first, 13 years of their education or so. And so, when people, there's thoughts and there's feelings, it's like, I want to read a book, but inside they feel like, nah, I'm good. That reading thing sucks. And so they don't do it, unfortunately. But hopefully more people will. I find it fascinating. I find it fun. And I just wish more people would do it,
What are you reading right now?
We make more time for social media and Netflix than we do for our own education, which I think is pretty sad, to be honest. Like not to piss on anybody, but it's just the truth.
I totally agree with you. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading a book called it's in the other room. It's Cynical Theories. I'm trying to understand political correctness and postmodernism and like critical race theory and critical legal theory and just some of the narrative that goes on and probably around the world. I'm trying to, because like from the outside looking in, not knowing a lot about these different theories and postmodernism and modernism and applied postmodernism, from not knowing much, I can't help but look at people who are espousing these narratives and be like what are you talking about? Like what you're saying doesn't make any sense. Oppressed and not oppressed and all this stuff, and I'm supposed to be oppressed, like just because I'm Black and because you're white you're automatically a racist and all this stuff. Like it's kind of wild. And so I've got a couple of books recently. I want to understand where they're coming from so I can maybe feel a little bit better about it, so I can be like, okay, I get that. Because I have a very open mind. And even some of the things that have been in the book, I've been like, okay, I get that. History is being written from the perspective of the people who like won the war as opposed to the people who lost the war. Okay, I get that. So I'm just trying to understand it better. So that's what I'm doing I'm kind of taking a break. I'm kind of taking a break from, did my audio change?
No, you're good now. You're good.
Okay. I'm kind of taking a break from mindset and personal development for like a week or so, and then I'll jump back into it. Yeah.
I think that's without going off on a huge tangent, I think that's a really interesting topic, especially in today's world with, say, from the cancel culture, from Rogan to Mr. Potato Head not being a Mister to the slap heard around the world this week. And it's interesting seeing how these things break off into narratives. Men versus women, black versus white. And I think it says a lot about you, that rather than coming into this from an emotional position like a lot of people do, it's like, right, what is behind these people that take this, a slap at the Oscars, and make it a huge race or toxic masculinity? Like, where's the gap here? What am I not seeing? Mm-hmm. And I think that's interesting that you go about it that way. It says a lot about you and your character.
Thank you. And there's so many people like attaching on to this narrative. And I just don't want to believe that they're dumb. You know what I'm saying? I just don't want to believe like these are idiot people who aren't really thinking. So again, I just want to look at like, what are the underpinnings of the information and why they feel this way and why they're saying what they're saying. So I will stop walking around going, wow, you guys make no sense. I just want to have some understanding.
And you come at it with such a level of emotion, right? That it's not like they've made a snap opinion or judgment about something. Like there's so much behind some of these arguments that there's more to it than what you see on face value.
Yeah. And when I have conversations with these individuals and I ask them, like, why do you think what you think? Many times they don't know. And so that's why I'm just like, I don't understand like how you're so emotional about something and you can't give me a single fact about it. It's all this emotional stuff. And I just want to understand it better so I can maybe feel a little more relieved about it.
Yeah. So moving on to the money thing, and in a way, in a bit of a segue, because you did a podcast recently about the limiting beliefs about money that people don't understand, and it's another thing that a lot of people have these opinions about money and wealth that make no sense, but it's something that's in the back of the mind that's stopping them. Before we delve into it, like, why is it that you think money is important? Why do you think that's because there's always going to be someone that has that belief that thinks, well, why is it important to chase wealth? Why is Simon and Sean talking about wealth on a show? What is it that makes generating wealth something that's important enough to you to write courses on, help people with?
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be wealth. If the meaning of the word wealth is you have to be a millionaire or a billionaire or something like that, that's not what we're talking about, right? If that's your choice, you can certainly do that with the information that I provide. What I mean is just having some financial freedom. I simply cannot believe, when people tell me like money's not important, I'm just like, bullshit. Let's just be honest. Anybody who says money is not important is usually broke and they're stressed out all of the time over money. I used to believe that rich people were obsessed with money and all they thought about was money. And when I really thought about it, I was like, nope, broke people are obsessed with money and they're always thinking about money, because that's how I was when I didn't have any money. I was like, how am I going to have enough money to pay the rent? How am I going to have enough money to get some new shoes? How am I going to have enough money to feed myself? Like, it's so stressful. And, in the first pages of Wallace Wattles' book, The Science of Getting Rich, he talks about, and I think it's rather true, how it is impossible to live a full life without having lots of money. It's impossible. If you want to, develop your skills, you're going to have to get a coach. Maybe you're going to have to buy courses. You're going to have to attend courses. You're going to have to fly yourself to a seminar. You're going to have to do those kinds of things. If you want your kids to get a great education and you don't want to send them to the public school system, you're going to have to fork out some money so they can go to a better school, right? You're going to have to have some money maybe in your family so you can afford to have babysitters and nannies and things, like somebody to help out. If you want to be healthy, it takes money to buy like healthy, organic, free range, grass-fed food, like on and on. Like all of these things, my friends, require money. And when you don't have money, it's really hard to be healthy. It's really hard to be educated. It's really hard to stay in a healthy relationship. Like actually the main reason for divorces is money problems. So you're gonna need some money. So when people, tell me again, money isn't that important, I call bullshit every single time, because if I were to write that person $100,000 check and be like, here you go, they would take it every time. Let's just be honest. And then we have people who say that, money's not important, but when the lottery is like $1.3 billion, they'll go get a ticket. Well, I don't understand. Like that's such hypocrisy to me, that there'll be a line around the block of typically working class people who don't value money. Not all working class people don't value money by any means, but typically working class people are in line for a lottery ticket so they can win money for free when that money isn't really that important. Is the money not important, or is it that you just don't want to put in the risk that you're going to need to do in order to get the reward of more money?
I think we have sound bites of things like people say that money doesn't buy you happiness, and it's almost justifying people's feelings of being stuck. Like, if I don't take action, it's a safe space. You've got this safe environment. And when people say that money doesn't buy you happiness, it's like, well, there's levels to this. Like, money buys you freedom. Freedom buys you happiness. And they always say it's like, isn't it like $70,000 a year? After that point, you don't tend to get any happier. But it's up to a certain threshold when you have that more freedom.
I actually have this right in front of me because I had a cheat sheet for some questions, and I'm going to ask the audience. So I have this in front of me. So it's from a book called Neuro Wisdom, and the section is called "Who Are the Happiest People in the World?" The controversy began in 1974 when Richard Easterlin, a distinguished professor of economics at the University of Southern California, argued that there was little correlation between happiness and wealth. Since then, a series of research studies has shown that Easterlin was wrong. Not only do measurements of happiness rise as your income rises, so does your sense of well-being and life satisfaction. The following chart was prepared by the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago, summarizing nearly 40 years of accumulated worldwide statistics between 1972 and 2010. And what it shows is that we'll just say right now, people who make less than $12,500 a year, which is the bottom 10%, 26% are not too happy. People who make over $150,000, which was the top 10%, 2% are not too happy. That's a huge difference. For that bottom 10%, 21% were very happy. For the people who made over $150,000, 53% were very happy. And so we could talk about like the threshold. So happiness goes up with money. We can say until $150,000. Well, that's awesome. Let's make $150,000. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what the science says. And so when people say money won't make you happy, I strongly disagree based on actual real research. And, in my Money Mind Academy class, I used to ask them, this comes from the same book, Neuro Wisdom. Let me actually pull this up real fast since I have it. If you were given a choice between happiness and wealth, and you can only have one of them, which would you select? And, you'll see in the chat, happiness, 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 wealth, happiness, 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 wealth. And then I asked them, okay, what would you do if you were the happiest person in the world? And there's some interesting answers, because they say, share it with people. Like, what is that? Like, what does that even look like? Sharing your happiness with people. Like, what does that mean? So what does that look like? Oh, I'm just going to go around and be happy and love. Like, that's the annoying person. Let's just be honest. Like, the really happy people all the time are actually pretty freaking annoying. So it's not really sharing happiness. I would build this, I would build that, but wait, you're just happy. You're not wealthy. Are you paying with happiness dollars? What are you doing here? Right? And people go, oh, that's right. I'm just happy. I'm not wealthy. Okay. So it's funny how unconsciously people associate happiness with wealth when they're not even really thinking about it. It's the trip. And so another question I asked is, what would you do if you were the wealthiest person in the world? So for the audience, think about that. What would you do if you were the wealthiest person in the world? And people are like, I would build hospitals. I would build schools. I would build shelters for battered women. I would do this. I would create a company, employ this many people. I would do this, that, and the other, right? All these inspiring things. And then I asked them, hypothetically, which would you rather be? The happiest person in the world or the wealthiest? Of course, like the answer is both, but both is not an option here. What would you rather be? The happiest person in the world or the wealthiest? Everybody, maybe there'll be one exception, says they'd rather be the wealthiest. You know, happiness, the word actually comes from happenstance. And so people have this expectation like you're going to be happy all the time. That is a false expectation, period. Nobody is happy all the time. Life is going to have ups and life's going to have downs. Sometimes you're going to wake up in the morning and not be happy. Other days you're going to be amazingly happy. But what research actually finds is that people who are always looking for happiness tend to be the most depressed, because they're kind of looking for something, this 100% happy thing that doesn't exist. And when you're looking for something that doesn't exist and you have that expectation, you're never going to meet that expectation. So you become depressed. And so if you can make more money and do the things that you love and have more autonomy, which means that you could do whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do it, however you want to do it, like that makes somebody happy. You know, imagine saying, I've got enough money in the bank where I can just take the week off. You know, I've got enough money where I can take my family to a dope ass vacation and we don't all have to stay in the same room. Everybody can have their own room and we can eat whatever we want and we can do all the excursions that we want and we don't have to sweat about it. Oh, I can order the lobster and not have to keep getting the chicken. I really want the lobster, but it's market price. And I don't even know what market price is. And I want to ask about market price. Like people who have money don't care what the market price is. They just order it because that's what they want. And so I think money has gotten a long answer. I think money has gotten a very bad rap, but this is part of our conditioning. This has been wired into our brains. And so we take these actions and we make these decisions automatically without even thinking.
It's interesting you talk about that happiness all the time isn't a thing. I had Dr. Pat Davidson on the show a few months ago, and he spoke. We came on initially talking about training and nutrition and things like this, and we ended up speaking about his addiction and his route to happiness and communication issues. And he talked about it like a mountain. There's always shadowy sides to the mountain, and as you go up, you will go back into the light, back into the shadow. But the more you do it, the more you start to get into the shadow. You go, it's okay. I know there's a light side at the end of it because I've been there before. But when you speak about the statistics about people being happier, more wealth, and people saying there's truth behind every statement in that money doesn't buy you happiness. Does this show that it's actually falling in love with the process in order to accrue wealth? That's maybe the difference between people that are happier at the higher income levels to the people that maybe handed this money. And that's maybe where all this is coming from.
Well, the process is important, you know, especially those who get to do what they love, earning money. Like most people aren't really doing what they love. They do stuff that they hate every single day. And that's not really a recipe for happiness, right? Also, you know, me doing what I love the becoming part. Like the risks that I take, the actions I take, putting myself out there, taking action on my ideas, trying to bring them to fruition. There's growth that comes with every step of that. I have grown significantly as a person. Like the person you interviewed several years ago, like that's not even really me anymore. Like I've moved up a few levels in the video game of life because of what I've done since then, right? Which makes me much happier. And as a result of that, I've been able to earn money. But on the other, another part of this is when you're always behind on your bills and bill collectors are calling and you don't know like what you're going to be eating next week and there's not enough to go around and your kids are like, they want this, that, and the other, but you can't provide that to them. And you're fighting with your spouse about money all the time. I'm not sure how you can be happy. That just sounds like a miserable existence. A lot of people are wearing their poverty like as this badge. I don't find poverty to be virtuous in any means, by any means. Like if you are, you know, they say that you're created in the image of God. Like I don't see being broke as part of that image by any means. Like you were put here to live an abundant life. Like you're already connected to abundance. You know, the story I like to tell about this is in terms of our connection to abundance is, back in the day when my dad used to drive us to school, he used to drive Cadillacs. And, this one particular Cadillac, sometimes it wouldn't start. And so my dad would get out of the car, he'd lift up the hood and he'd look at the battery. He'd be like, see, Sean, there's corrosion around the connections. So he would take the little clips off, right? And then he like clean off the connector part and he put them back on and then the car would start. We have too much corrosion covering up our connection to abundance, right? And the corrosion that we have are these limiting beliefs, the programs, the beliefs, the ideas, the opinions that we absorbed from people who were around us, typically during our first 7 years of life, that have the conflicts that we have as well, the fears that we have of being kicked out of our tribe, right? Because money and our attitudes around money is typically multi-generational. Poverty goes back many, many, many generations within the same family, and it's up to you to break that generational curse. But sometimes breaking that generational curse, you no longer connect with your family anymore because your way of thinking is so different from their way of thinking that there's no resonance. And there's an inner fear, like almost like evolutionary fear of being kicked out of that tribe. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like right there in the middle is love and connection. Above that is self-esteem. Above that is self-actualization. But many people cannot get past love, connection, and belonging because it's scary to no longer connect and belong to your tribe. So because we're so stuck at that level, because we need to be liked, because so many of us don't have the courage to be disliked, we never get to self-esteem. We never get to self-actualization because we care too much about what others think about us. And I feel like it's a way of living a corrupt existence where you're not really being yourself, where you're acting like someone else in order to fit in with the rest of the tribe. And I think that kind of life is a life of like feeling that feeling inside of you all the time, that gnawing feeling where there's more. There's more freedom, there's more options, there's more abundance, there's more you can do, but you're allowing yourself to be somebody else who you're not in order to keep people in the room. Like most people are doing that. And it's essentially just safety because your brain is wired for safety, survival, protection. It is the people who are willing to say, hey, brain, I know you're trying to protect me. I know you're trying to save me. Thanks, but no thanks. I got to go to the next level.
So tell us a little bit about your relationship with money, because you mentioned that as like people who have this thing where they know the brain's trying to protect them, they act anyway. And you mentioned earlier in this episode about that when you were broke and you had, you've all had a journey with money yourself. And we spoke on the last episode about you selling your belongings to do your course. So that takes a level of bravery in a time where a lot of people would be very much trapped. What do you think allowed you mentally to take those big leaps early on in your career when you maybe didn't have that confidence and behind you, or that wins and track record behind you to go, okay, this is going to work?
I did have wins behind me, but it was a different context. I've always believed in myself, right? Like my parents raised me that I can do whatever I put my mind to. However, there were just blocks in terms of money itself. And so elementary school, high school, college, when I wanted to turn it on, I could turn it on. And I'd be like, here's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to get straight A's this semester. Boom, I get straight A's that semester. I'm going to get a perfect score on this chemistry test. Okay, got perfect score on the chemistry test, right? I'm going to get the best grade in this class. I'm going to screw up the curve. All right, that's what I did. So I've always believed that I had the ability to do whatever I want to do. And so when I said to myself, oh, here's an opportunity for a health program, a health coaching program that I know I can do really big things with, it didn't really take any second thought for me to take my TV back to the store and get my money back so I can invest in this program. Because I was like, I'm going to crush this. And so I think that's just a matter of self-confidence and self-belief, which for a lot of people is lacking, because a lot of people weren't raised the way that I was raised. I was raised to believe in myself. I was raised to study. I was raised to make my own money. I was raised to have independence and responsibility. I didn't have helicopter parents who were always just like, what are you doing? You know, it was like, be careful. Like, I didn't really have that. I would be like 11 years old. I'd be like, hey, mom, I'm going to go wherever. She's like, bye. You know what I'm saying? Like in 2022, it's like, no, you're not going anywhere at 13 years old without me watching your every move. You know, I find it hard. Like I see adults these days who have no confidence, who have no who sense of independence, who have no personal responsibility as a value. And a lot of that just comes back down to their parenting, the way that they were parented. So what was your question again? I forget.
It was basically talking through your relationship with money and sort of like the roadblocks you had.
Gotcha. So my relationship with money was it's interesting because I have two different programmings. I have like birth through age 10 being raised very well off, right? And then my parents got divorced, and then 10 to 17, like we were broke. And I heard a lot of stuff about, you know, those rich people, and, you know, we were the brokest people in my school, some of the brokest people in my city of Alameda. And I just heard so many things about those rich people, those bad people, those people with money, during those times of my life, that later on in my maybe mid-20s, when I was really struggling with making money, you know, I had a lot of followers on YouTube. I might have had 30, 40,000 followers on YouTube, but I wasn't making much money. And I was afraid to charge what I was worth. And I had this realization one day, actually two realizations. Number one was that I didn't want to become one of them, right? If I made more money, I was going to become one of them, the other people, the greedy, miserable, rich people that I heard so much about earlier in my life. Also, I learned from Dr. John Demartini that I didn't have a high value on money. Money just wasn't very important to me. You know, on the range, like the stove of my values, money and financial freedom, saving, investing, and investing money was way on the back burner. It was like 10 burners back. You know, there were so many things that were more important, such as my social life, such as my health, my fitness, such as like dating, such as like wearing the right pair of shoes, like those type of things were so important to me that I didn't put any energy or have any value or place any or much importance on saving, earning, investing money at the time. And then one thing I did, I was like, okay, and I learned this from Dr. Demartini. How can earning more money help my social life? How could it help me with my fitness and my health? Okay, I can buy whatever food I want. I can, you know, get any supplement that I want. How can it help with my self-study, my education? I can buy any book I want. I can go to any workshop I want. I can hire any coach I want. Like I can really improve my education by way of having more money. And so that's kind of like, it's kind of like playing Let's Make a Deal with your brain, where you're like, hey, brain, I know this money thing isn't that important, but the things that we value, the things that you consider important, the things that we love, we can get more of that if we have more money. And the brain goes, you know what? You've got a point. That's a really good idea. Let's go. And ever since then, it's been this journey of making more and more and more and more money without excruciating effort. You know what I'm saying? Without like, you know, working 15 hours a day. Yes, I go through my times where I'm just like working a lot, trying to create something, but most of my life, most of my year is pretty chill, where I'm working like 3 or 4 hours a day. And then after 12 noon, I'm chilling. It's kind of nice.
See, with that, you obviously mentioned the things that you changed the way you believed in your values based on, if I have more money, I can have more resources for the things that I truly value at that moment in time. And obviously these are very spending orientated. I think one of the things that a lot of people are confused about when it comes to money is you'll see one person talking about money going, it's all about saving, putting money aside, making sure you have enough in the bank for the rainy day. And then you've got other people going, well, if you're cutting out all your coffees to save money, you're sort of defeating the point. Where do you sit on this sort of balance between, like, okay, you need to save money to procure wealth, or you need to make money to procure wealth?
I don't believe in the whole, like, you gotta cut your lattes skip the lattes, cut your Netflix, take shorter showers, get more blankets so you don't have to run the heater at night. Like nobody like save their way to wealth. Like that just doesn't happen. If you tried to save your way to wealth and now we were looking at inflation, oh, you're screwed. You just lost money when you think about it because of inflation. So saving your way to wealth is not going to happen. What my specialty is releasing the blocks and moving past the obstacles that are keeping you from making more money. That's the thing. Because once you remove the blocks, once you get rid of the limiting beliefs, you essentially become a magnet for money. And what I mean by that is like when you get rid of these beliefs and these conflicts and such, you no longer undervalue your services, right? You no longer want to go to a job that doesn't pay you enough because now that you've moved these blocks, one of the biggest blocks is a self-worth block. People don't feel worthy and deserving of making the amount of money that they want. But when we do some things in Money Mind Academy and we identify like what's in the box, the box is your self-worth, and everything that you want outside of the box you can't get because your self-worth box is only so big. And so we do some exercises such as visualization, such as breaking down these limiting beliefs in order to expand the box of self-worth. And so you can actually have the things that you want. But if you got a little box of self-worth, you're never going to have these things that are outside because they don't match who you are as a person. Your net worth will never exceed your self-worth. You probably heard that before, right? And so when you expand your self-worth, you're like, oh, I can go get the kind of job that I want. I can do the entrepreneurial endeavor that I think is going to make the amount of money. And not only that, I can handle the ups and downs emotionally. Where before, if I made a mistake, I felt like a failure as a person. But now that I've expanded my self-worth, now that I've reframed failure, I know that if I make a mistake, it doesn't mean anything about me. It was just feedback. It was a lesson. It told me what not to do, but I'm still going to keep going forward, right? Now, I do want to back up. So I want to make sure that I cover this with your audience. Money itself means what? What people associate money with what? Starts with an F. You'll have more freedom. Exactly. People don't like freedom as much as we think they like freedom.
Interesting.
That's the problem. Yeah. We talk about freedom like it's amazing, like an amazing thing. And it is an amazing thing. Like I enjoy freedom every single day, but freedom freaks a lot of people out. I'm not sure if you heard this episode of the podcast, but do you have a cheesecake factory in the UK?
In the UK, no, but we do have one in Hong Kong. So I have experienced it.
Okay, so the Cheesecake Factory, for those who are watching who haven't been there, their menu is, I think, 24 pages long. There's hundreds of items on this menu. And if you go to the Cheesecake Factory, most people are so flustered. They're so afraid of making a decision. They're so afraid of being wrong that they might pick the wrong possibility. Now, what do they end up doing? They ask the server, what do you like? Okay, I'm going to have that. Because then they don't have to take personal responsibility for what they chose. If what they get their food and they don't like it, they could be like, oh, that's not my fault. I just, I got what the server liked and I thought I would like it. Now I don't, right? So this is life. But instead of life having a 24-page menu, life's menu is infinite. There are so many possibilities for your life. And the fact that there's so many possibilities scares the shit out of people, right? They're like, what if I pick the wrong one? What if I'm wrong? What if I commit my life to a possibility that I'll never get? And, what Soren Kierkegaard called this, he said, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. Freedom can make you dizzy because freedom makes you feel anxiety. So when people don't have money and then they start moving toward having more money, it's unknown. It's a journey that they've never been on. So how are they going to feel? Are they going to feel like happy, like hi ho, and off, to whatever we go? No, they're not going to feel that way. They're going to feel anxiety because they've never done it before. And When you start to feel anxiety, because our society is so pathologized anxiety, it made anxiety such a bad thing, people say to themselves, I shouldn't feel this way. And they get that self-talk, you shouldn't be doing this. This doesn't feel right. Maybe this isn't for you. This is for white people, right? Then what people end up doing, because they feel so much anxiety, is they quit and they go back to point A, and then they feel better. They feel a sense of relief. But then soon thereafter, they start to feel a sense of despair because there's this financial freedom that they want and they don't have it. So like, you know what? Let's go do it again. And they do it again, then they start to feel the anxiety. Like, oh, this doesn't feel right. Oh, I made a mistake. Oh, I failed at something. Maybe this isn't for me. I'm going to go back. And then they feel more relief. And then they feel despair. And then they feel disappointment. They feel disappointed in themselves. So they're like, you know what? Let's go do this thing again. And they go and do it again. They feel anxiety. I shouldn't feel this way. They go back to point A. And now they're feeling depressed because they're disappointed in themselves, right? And also because there's this sense of despair of something that they want, but they can't have. And maybe they can't have it because they're not good enough. So they start to feel depressed. So here's the choice that we have to make in life. And this is why I think people go through the whole song and dance of like, money doesn't make you happy and money, da, 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 da. Like, it's because your choice is depression or it's anxiety. That's it. That is a choice of life. To grow or to not grow. When you're not growing, you're depressed. When you're growing, you have anxiety. But instead of framing the anxiety as it's this terrible thing that I need to get medicated for, anxiety to me, because I feel anxiety every day because I'm growing every day, anxiety to me is a sign, it's an indicator of growth, that I'm stepping into the unknown territory of life. And I've never been here before. So of course I'm going to feel this way. This is one of the reasons why so many people are broke, because they're afraid of the journey, because the journey makes them anxious and they so pathologize anxiety that they're like, nope, I'm good. I'm just going to make up a story of good and evil because I'm good, because I'm broke. And everybody who has money and money itself is evil. So I'm going to hang out over here in my partially depressed, despairing, disappointing state. And I'm going to live in this story as of I'm morally good and people who have money are morally bad. This is what's going on right now, but most people don't know it, unfortunately.
It's a common place that happens in a lot of things, right? We get seen the same thing in dieting culture, right? You often, when you get people with the anti-diet movement and big and beautiful and this kind of thing, and if you're generally big and beautiful and you're confident and you're happy, be my guest. But generally it's that same thing. It's the person who's tried for financial growth and failed, in inverted commas, that often says those people are bad, they're greedy. In the same way that people that failed the dieting realm are often the people that now have this negative connotation towards this. And going back to what we spoke about earlier, how much of this do you think is about kind of getting stuck into the process of it and learning to embrace that anxiety? That's the thing. Because a lot of people go into, I'll be happy when I reach X financial growth. I'll be happy when I hit my six pack. And rather than going, I'm going to start to enjoy the things that get me there. Like, do you think that's why there's a failure? Because it's their happiness is living and breathing on this external thing.
Yeah. That's not how it works. You have to generate happiness along the way. One of my favorite quotes is from Dr. Serini Pillay, and I'm not going to say it perfectly, but he says, optimism is not the effect of success, it's the cause of it. So, many people believe that when they have what they want, as you said, they're going to be happy. Doesn't work that way. Does not work that way. You're not going to get there. In the spiritual sense, people talk about like raising your vibration to match the thing that you want. Raising your vibration is like raising your feeling state, right? I'm going to be happy and whatever, joyful, fulfilled before I get there. That's how it needs to be. But if you're waiting to be happy, here's the thing. A very common thing that happens, because people are really setting themselves up for disappointment here. When you set a big goal and you imagine like, I'm going to be so overjoyed when I reach that goal. It's almost like people who write books they find, and I found this myself when I wrote my ebook, Dark Side of Fat Loss, when you finish the book, the fireworks don't happen. It's a very strange thing. They don't happen. You're like, I thought it was going to like feel like this when I got here. And it usually doesn't. And so when people are like, I'm going to be happy when I get there, you're setting yourself up for disappointment, because when you get there, it's usually not what you thought it was or was going to be.
It's gold medal syndrome, right? And it's you often people speak about it when they come back from the Olympics and they have this big level of depression that they've never felt before. Like Dorian Yates, the pro bodybuilder, multiple time Mr. Olympia, when he retired, he ended up feeling very, very lost for many, many years because his life had this purpose going for these Mr. Olympias. And I've not to the same extent, but I certainly have experienced it doing like fitness photo shoots and getting incredibly lean. It's an interesting goal because it's something like a lot of people going in on all in on businesses. Every bit of focus and purpose and drive is towards this one day. Everything I eat, everything I do, everything I move. And then Sunday comes, I do the shoot and it's good. And then it's just Monday. Nothing's changed. It's exactly the same. And now I'm the same person without the drive and purpose that's carried me through the last 3 months maybe in financial world, decade. When you've had people like this who've maybe we're skipping a step, but cured wealth through your courses and things like this, you must have seen a lot of this. Like, what is it something that you found ways of helping people through, or was it the approach that you took to get there defines how easy you are to get through those moments?
Not sure if I fully understand the question, but what I will say is this. Here's the best strategy for how to not get that let down. Have your next step planned before you finish the first. So when I finish this book, when I lose this weight, here's going to be the next thing that I do. Because that way you don't lose your purpose so quickly. It's like, okay, my purpose of finishing this book or losing this weight, boom, I got it. But I already know what the next summit's going to be. You know what I'm saying? So instead of like going down, like back to the base of the one you just climbed and being like, well, where do I go from here? You get to the top of the summit and you're like, okay, there's the next one we're going to go for. And like, there's the next one we're going to go for. There's the next one. So kind of planning out your next steps really helps with that, instead of being stuck with no purpose going, okay, what am I going to do? With weight loss, I'm going to try to articulate this in the best way I can. One thing that people are afraid of in terms of like going along the journey to whatever it is that they want is the accountability, that you are accountable for what happens here. Like you are the captain of your ship, freaks people out. You are the captain of your weight loss. Like that's a heavy load to hold. You know what I'm saying? To hold with yourself, to hold with the people who know you're trying to lose weight. That's kind of a burden to bear. That's a lot of accountability. A lot of people fall off of their diets because they can't handle the accountability. They're just like, this is just too much for me. I just want to, you know what? That cake looks fantastic. I can release this accountability for a little while. It's going to feel a lot better. And then they eat the cake, And so there's usually some payoff. There's usually some reward for calling a timeout during our journey. The reward is I get to drop this anxiety. The reward is I get to drop the burden of this accountability. The reward is I no longer have to do this alone. Because really, whenever you're striving towards something, you might have people who support you, but you're the person who has to do the thing. And it can feel very alone. So saying at some point, I give up, actually is very relieving for a lot of people. And, one thing that the brain and one thing that all of us are trying to do through our lives is avoid uncomfortable emotions. Like your brain is just wired for that. It's like, you know what? Change is uncomfortable, right? And so we say to ourselves, I'm going to stop. And we make these whole stories around it. But one of the biggest reasons is like your brain gets a dopamine hit from pleasure, like moving toward pleasure, but your brain also gets a dopamine hit from avoiding pain. And so quitting makes us feel good. And when you're aware of that, you can say to yourself, oh, I'm trying to quit because my brain wants to feel good and it wants to avoid these uncomfortable emotions. When you can observe that and stand above that and have some psychological distance with it, where you, instead of participating in it, you observe it, that's when your whole life changes. That's when you stop blaming people and being a victim and saying it's somebody else's fault, all that stuff. That's the easy way out. Like, the real way out is to get to the other side. The only way to get to the other side is by dealing with the anxiety, embracing the accountability, and being willing to be alone, and to also embrace, something that so many people try to push away, which is a sense of agency, right? Agency means that you have control over the circumstances of your life. If you don't have agency, you're never going to be able to achieve any goal, because it's always going to be somebody else's fault, because nothing is out of your hand. Nothing, like, everything is out of your hands. You in your mind, you have no control. Like, that's a really shitty way to live. Like, you just kind of float along with life, and it's always some external force trying to push you around. Like, people don't realize how powerful they are. Like, what you have in here is just like, there's this miracle inside of your head that can take you to wherever you want to go, only if you use it. But it requires energy, it requires consciousness, it requires a willingness to be disliked, it requires a courage to be kicked out of the tribe in order to get to the next level of life. And that scares the hell out of people. So I see, like, when I hear people's excuses, I also hear the truth when I hear their excuses. That's just bullshit. What you're really trying to do is this. Oh, yeah, I am.
I suppose that it's a little bit goes back to that freedom thing, right? Like, you mentioned earlier on with the Cheesecake Factory, that I want to try and eliminate the personal responsibility for making that choice. And I suppose that's why people, I don't want to make it sound like being in a job and having a steady paycheck rather than running your own business is a bad thing, because it's not. And I think I found one of your latest podcasts really interesting, where you talked about almost taking personal responsibility and ownership within an organization in terms of making more money, and you looking at your employer as the customer, which I thought was really fascinating, in that sense of, like, that's how to sort of take that ownership and accountability back in a position where people may be in that role to have that safety. It's my boss that dictates how much money I make. It's my family and my social circle that it dictates how many calories I eat. These things become regular occurrences. These are reasons why I stay trapped. It's not in my control. Like, how do you help people who are in that mindset, a fixed mindset, start to take that ownership and start to be okay with that sort of uncertainty, I suppose?
I'm honest with them. Uncertainty is life. Like, we're so afraid of uncertainty. Uncertainty is, you cannot escape uncertainty. It is absolutely impossible to escape uncertainty. It's just, it is so weird, because it's almost like a cosmic joke, because our brains don't like uncertainty. Like, they're wired to not want uncertainty, but at the same time, the brain kind of is what guides us through life, which is uncertain. It's weird how that works. And so just being honest with people and saying, here's are some strategies for uncertainty. I did this with my boss brain students the other day. When we're uncertain, the brain tends to forget that it can try things. Like, I tell my students, like, if you're not sure what your niche is, what are the 3 niches that you've been thinking about? Okay, try one for 3 months. See what happens. Then try another one for 3 months. See what happens. Then try the other one for 3 months and see which one you like the best. And then make the decision, okay, I'm going to do this, as opposed to, due to uncertainty, going year after year after year after year without ever picking a niche. So, like, you can do that. You can try. Another thing is to break things down. If I were to ask, even me right now in my current state, as I told you before we started recording, like, I've got a lot of stuff going on right now. And, one of the things that I do in order to deal with overwhelm, which is so common, it kind of has to be, well, people got kids, they got all kind of stuff going on. Like, it's really hard to not feel overwhelmed, is to break it down and remember that. And there's a part of your brain called the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. or no, it's the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is like your mental to-do list. And it can only hang on to like 7 to 9 things at a time in all areas of your life at the same time to see 7 to 9 things. What we're trying to do as humans, as business owners, we're trying to overstuff the to-do list, right? And we can't help but feel overwhelmed. So one thing I recommend that people do is like, break it down. Like take this big thing, take this big mountain that you're trying to climb, and let's break it down to the first step. What's going to be our first step? Let's do that first. And then let's take our second step. So what that looks like for my students is like, okay, you want to do Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and you want to write blog posts. You're not going to do any of it. Let's just keep it real. Let's just focus on Instagram for now. Let's do that for a good 6 months. Let's get into a groove with that. And then after 6 months, if you feel like you want to add in Facebook or podcasting, then you can do that. But you're putting too much stuff on the to-do list for your brain. So we got to chunk things down. That makes a huge difference for everybody. You cannot walk in 12 different directions at the same time. It just simply doesn't work. And so, my philosophy on life, everybody knows, is little by little, a little becomes a lot. If you take an action today and another action tomorrow and another action the next day and another action the next day, and you make a decision the next day and you take an action the next day, and you do that for 365 days, where you're going to be after a year is mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. You will look back and be like, oh my God, like look at all of those steps and look at where I am right now. But when you're trying to do too many different things at the same time, you typically take no steps. And at the end of the year, you look back and you go, I wasted it. And the end of the next year, you go, I wasted it, when you could have been taking little steps every single day.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I've been reading the One Thing recently by Gary Keller. Look at me name dropping a book. I feel like you're rubbing off on me, Sean.
There you go.
But reading that recently, and that so I looked at my life recently, and like it was amazing how like I didn't think I was overstuffing that thing. I wasn't looking at the amount of things on my plate. But when I actually broke it down, things that maybe in the same realm that I go, no, that's one thing. And then actually I look at it and go, actually, I'm sort of running 2 jobs. I'm sort of adding this on top. I'm sort of doing this. And then I was like, right, I need to clear some mental bandwidth. And I need to come back and go, right, what is important right now? What if I get 6 months down the line, what am I going to be most disappointed in if I haven't made improvements in those areas? And I looked at, I was trying to balance a hobby. I was trying to balance my online business, my in-person business. Hey, we've got a guest.
Yeah, Mr. Kobe.
I was trying to balance like all these different things around a lockdown, which is you're already going into it with a bit of a half a battery when you're going through a lockdown. And I was like, right, I just need to streamline some of these things and just focus on what's important. So I think that's a really, really, really important point that I think many people don't do enough. Like, how do people, if people are in this position, how do they work out what's the important thing to focus on? What is the one thing for them?
It depends on what they want to do. So where we typically, Kobe, thanks, buddy. We'll hang out in a minute. So he's becoming a teenager like this last 2 weeks. He's a little wild lately. He's kind of getting on my nerves a little bit. All right, teenage boy, go back. Go. So I think the first thing for people who want to make more money specifically is to become more aware of their limiting beliefs, to become more aware of their automatic patterns. So for example, it's so funny. I've had many cars, but I had a Mercedes G-Wagon for a couple years there. It's like $110,000 car, right? I've never had more door dings in my life. It's crazy. Like people will just be like, F your door. No. And, driving on the freeway, like I've driven other cars and people have no problem like letting me over. When you're trying to get over in a G-Wagon, people will not let you. It's very strange. It's like this automatic behavior that they have. And so, one thing I say is like, okay, how do you feel when you are near somebody who has money? So how do you feel when you drive up to next to somebody in a fancy car? Do you go, oh my God, they must have stolen that money, they're greedy, miserable people? Or do you say, oh, I wonder who they had to serve and what they had to create and what they had to go through in order to have something like that? You know what I'm saying? It's just catching yourself jumping to conclusions about people because of some old belief from a long time ago, some assumption. Maybe what's another one? You know, there's so many interesting beliefs about money. If you make a lot of money, you can't be spiritual. Like sometimes people think this. They go, I'm not going to be able to go to heaven. I can't be spiritual, on and on. Catch yourself and ask yourself the question, are all rich people, do they have the inability to be spiritual? And of course, the answer is going to be no. And it's kind of funny because where do a lot of us get our spiritual advice from? We get our spiritual advice from rich people. We get it from like Gabrielle Bernstein, is Gabrielle Bernstein? Oprah Winfrey, Marianne Williamson, Deepak Chopra, on and on. These are all rich people. So like our hypocrisies, like our inconsistencies are really interesting when we really think about them. So I just recommend like catching yourself when you get into these automatic thought patterns and breaking down or asking yourself. So actually, you know what, let me go through these questions real quick. I think they'll be really helpful and make this more clear for people. For example, rich people are greedy. When you think that, here are a few questions you can ask yourself. Number one, are all rich people greedy? Of course, the answer is going to be no. So that kind of blows up your belief already. You made a generalization that all rich people are greedy. Generalizations are usually not true. Okay. Number two, who exactly are these greedy rich people? What's their names? I need names. Make a list of names for all of the greedy rich people that you know. And they'll be like Trump, and they'll be like Jeff Bezos. And I'll be like, well, fine. I'm not going to argue with you on any of those. I don't know those people personally, but I'm not going to argue. But two people and all rich people are completely two different things. You cannot say all rich people are greedy and you can only give me two examples of real. Kim Kardashian. Okay, cool. Three people. So out of all of the rich people in the world, you have this sweeping generalized belief that they're all rich and greedy, but you can only give me three examples. Here's another one. How do you know? How do you know Kim Kardashian is greedy? Did you have a conversation with her? Did you look at her taxes? Like, what did you like? What? Like, are you in her business meetings? Have you talked to her? You really don't know. You've literally just made a story in your head based on something that mom or dad said a long time ago that was reinforced by the media and so on and so forth. Even if this belief, here's a really important question. Even if this belief were somewhat true, could you be the exception? Right? Now we're starting to get into choice and possibility. Just because there are greedy rich people out there doesn't mean that there has to be a rule that you're going to be one when you become rich yourself. Right? It's so funny how we do that. The brain likes to save energy. It's an energy conserver. So it's like one side or the other. It doesn't like to play in the gray because the gray just requires too much energy and too much thought. So it's just like, we're just going to say all rich people are greedy. And since they're all greedy, then it means that I can't be rich because I'm going to be greedy. Like, no. Another one. This is a really important question as well. How does this belief serve me? Now, let me ask you, Simon, how could a belief that rich people are greedy, how can it serve somebody?
I suppose it comes back to that level of safety, right? It keeps them where they are.
Yeah, it keeps them safe. It means that it's okay for them to not move towards wealth because all rich people are greedy. It keeps them in the tribe. It keeps them from getting uncomfortable. It keeps them from feeling the anxiety. This made up story keeps people in their boxes for their entire lives when the story itself never really made any sense. It didn't. It was just a protective story, was what it was. How does this belief protect me? Kind of the same thing. It protects you from being rejected, from being criticized, from being seen and heard, from being judged, from being the topic of gossip, from being predated, we'll say, from attracting predators. right? For your money, for people asking for money, like all of these things you're protecting yourself from by having a belief that really made no sense in the first place. Without this belief, who would I be? That's a big one.
Mm.
Without this belief that all rich people are greedy, and without all of my other kind of silly beliefs about money and people with money, who would you be? And the answer is, I would be prosperous. I would be financially free. I would be more than I currently am because I'd be growing along the way. Because the belief itself is what's stunting your growth. Because then in order to grow, you got to keep moving forward, but the belief itself is keeping you in place. Imagine if you didn't have that belief. Imagine if you're dating and you didn't believe that all men or all women were cheaters. You'd probably be in a great relationship, but you're seeing dating through a lens of all men or women are cheaters. And as long as you do that, you're probably not going to find the right person.
It always becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? If you think all men and all women are cheating, you're going to be more jealous. You're going to be looking at it. And these things tend to push people away. In the same thing, I'm sure, with wealth.
Yeah, the brain it's a belief confirmation machine. That's all it is. It filters reality through the lenses of our beliefs. And so we will generalize, we'll distort, we'll delete information in order to fit our paradigm instead of seeing the world for what it really is. The map that we have in our brains doesn't really match the territory of where we are. We just see it through our beliefs. It's fascinating. It is so fascinating. And so we're belief confirmation machines, we're excuse-making machines, we're story-making machines as well. And most of this machinery is running on autopilot. We don't even know that it's going. And that's where that conscious awareness comes in. And I have to step in and be like, okay, this is not about cutting your Netflix account. This is not about skipping your latte. This is not about whatever. Like, this is about your beliefs. This is about your self-talk. This is about your emotions. What do a lot of people do? Here's the deal. You can take shorter showers. You can skip your lattes. You can do all of these silly things that people want you to do in order to save money. But what happens when you really have a bad day and you saved up $869? You're going to the mall. Or you're going to Amazon.com and you're spending your money again, because you haven't worked on the emotional intelligence part. And so this is what people do. Just like overweight people use food to feed their emotions, to calm their emotions, people who are broke usually use money to calm their own emotions.
Or even looking back to, I always find podcasting fascinating because we always end up going full circle. Every show I've ever done goes back in a full circle. Like we spoke about at the very start about what you're reading now, the same emotional reaction to somebody looking at a world event and finding an emotional attachment to keep them in their viewpoint. It's a subconscious thing. With everything we do, we see trends. We've mentioned weight loss, we've mentioned financial matters, we've mentioned views on political matters. They're all that same pattern working over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. We love proving ourselves right. That's just human nature. And when you can step outside of that human nature, your life is going to completely change when you can better cope and manage the anxiety that you feel. That is just part of life, the anxiety and the uncertainty. And you can start taking risks, and you can, know that when you move up to another level of life, there's new people up there. That new level of life is not just like one person just like up there. Like, there's other people up there like waiting for you to be like, hey, come on, come up here. The view's better, right? We feel better. We have better conversations. You know what it's like. Everybody knows what it's like to hang out with friends that you really don't connect with anymore, but they also make you feel like you belong. But the conversations that you're having, you really don't want to have. You're just there. You're just there talking about things that you really don't want to talk about. And it kind of feels draining. Like, there are people who want to have those real conversations with you. They exist, but they're just on the other level. Like, yo, come up the ladder. We're talking about the things that you want to talk about. Let's go. Stop being inauthentic. We talk so much about I want to be authentic. I want to be authentic. Like, if you are allowing a lack of courage to be disliked, if you're allowing, your sense of being connected and belonging to your friend group, even though you outgrew them a long time ago. If you're allowing that to keep you stuck, you're not being authentic. You're being inauthentic. You're being corrupt. You've corrupted yourself. You've corrupted yourself in your social life. You've corrupted yourself in your work life because you're going to a job that you hate every day in exchange for money. Right? To me, that is corrupt. And so stop being corrupt. Do what you really want to do. Be who you want to be, and be willing to go to the next level. If not, we are going to be up here having a good time anyway.
Yeah, I
not out of superior, not out of, just I want to say something because
yeah,
people tend to take, not out of superiority, but just like another level of consciousness. They're like, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. But a lot of people will be like, no, I'm good. I'm just going to stay down here. I just don't want people to stay down there.
The superiority thing is really interesting. I think one of my limiting beliefs around money that I had for a long time, that, when like you can hear things 1,000 times and someone says in a certain way, it's like, it clicked. I remember like one of the things that stopped me valuing my product and service and not charging what I'm worth, and maybe in some ways I still don't, but one of the big breakthroughs for me was I was like, I want to be able to make it accessible to as many people as possible. If I overprice myself, I can't help these people that maybe couldn't afford my product. And I spoke to a guy called Jordan Shallow, who's a big name in the fitness space now, and he was like, I used to try and do that, but if I made my service cheaper, the people are broke, still can't afford that product. And I now have to take on so many people to make ends meet that I haven't got time to help them. If I price myself at the value that I am worth, that allows me to work with fewer people, that frees up more time to make me better at serving them, but also allows me to send a personal voice note to someone that's struggling who can't afford me for free to get them up a peg. And I have more ability to help those people because I have looked after myself and my finances first. And that resonated with me so much. And to go into a couple of closing questions, I know you've got a very eager dog to go for a walk very, very soon.
Can I say something on that real quick?
Yeah, of course.
That, I will be honest, is something that I struggle with. It's almost like, here in America, we're switching over to green energy way too fast but anyway, and the narrative is like, go buy an electric car. Just go buy an electric car. And people who don't have money are going, wait, like, you want me to go buy a $60,000 car? Like, how does that work? I can't afford that. It doesn't make any sense. So sometimes I do struggle with, my Boss Brain Method program. The next time I launch, it's going to be $5,000. I do struggle with, there are those people who really need this information who just can't afford $5,000. And sometimes I think about Henry Ford. Like back in the day when Henry Ford was, creating the Model T, there were other cars at the time, but his was going to be cheaper. So it wasn't like made for like the elites. It was made for people who worked in his factories. And Henry Ford crushed it. He did more volume. He changed the world. So instead of the elite people being able to get the cars, everybody can get a car. So I do struggle with that in terms of the impact that I can have on the world. Do you make 1,000 sales at $1,000, or do you make 10 sales at 10,000, or 20 sales at 10?
I suppose the thing I'll flip on that is that if you make 20 sales at 10,000 and that frees up more of your time to do your podcast, to run small groups, to run webinars, for the people that generally can't afford your service to get this information, because they might not be, if people that can't afford 5,000 probably can't afford 1,000 either.
Not all. Do it on payment plan. Yeah. Somebody might be able to do it on payment plan. But I always tell my students though, that's what your podcast is for. That's what your social media content is for. That's what your YouTube content is for. A lot of the stuff that I teach on Mindset Coach is literally right off the slides of Money Mind Academy. And so, but the difference with Money Mind Academy, the difference with Boss Brain Method is you don't have one-on-one access to me, several days a week, and you don't have the community that's in the programs. which are huge. I mean, people are looking for community. So the information is important. But again, the access and the community are what set, the podcast apart from the actual program itself. So, but it is, excuse me, something that I think about quite frequently is, hey, if you just lowered the price, could you bring in a higher volume of people, help more people, and then change the world faster? So it's just something I'm always noodling on.
So like, for a couple of closing questions, we spoke about a lot of different things here that hold people back. What was the biggest either bit of advice or breakthrough choice that you made in your life that changed your view on money?
I think that DeMartini thing with the values, if you don't value money, you're just not going to have it. It's just not that important in the grand scheme of things. I think that was a big one. I think, as I said earlier, realizing that subconsciously I didn't want to be one of them was a really big deal for me. That's for money. I think in life in general, though, I think one of the most important things anybody ever told me was a couple of years ago, and I was complaining to Dr. Pillay about some things in a seminar I was attending, and mostly business stuff. Like, one thing I struggle with in business is like so many people asking me to do things, you know what I mean? And then like returning DMs and all of this stuff. It's just a lot of work, man. And I was complaining about these things, and a couple of days later in the seminar, just kind of offhand randomly, he says, Sean, the reason you don't have the business you want to have is because you're not committed to having it. Once you become committed to having it, then you don't have it. And I was like, this motherfucker's right. And I think that's what's missing for a lot of people. It's something I just watched with Patrick Bet-David. I was finding clips for the QOD show. There's a big difference between I want and I will. It was like, I want this. Let's just talk. Saying I will have this is something completely different. Most people want what they won't will. And that's where commitment is involved. If you're not fully committed to it, it's not going to happen. If you kind of want it, if you're kind of committed to it, if it's easy, if it's like super easy to knock you off your horse as you're riding toward wherever you want to go, you're not in it. If you're going to quit the first time you make a mistake, or you encounter an obstacle, or you have a little loss, like, you weren't committed. I think most people don't know what commitment really means. I think they just don't know. They're not all in. And they got one foot out, maybe even a toe in, and the rest of everything out. And, when you want to spend, I'm always harping on this, when you want to spend hours a day on Netflix, on Facebook, watching your TV, you're not committed, period, point blank. And if you're wondering why you're not getting the results that you want to get, it's usually because you're just not committed to having them. Once you become committed to having them, then you'll have them.
I totally agree with that. And you can see it as well. You can see it in people's language when they use words like try. Like that's
probably.
With dieting, another one is I want sustainable. And I'm not saying a sustainable diet isn't what we're aiming for. Of course it is. But a lot when people, on day one, when people go, I just want to make sure this diet is sustainable before they've even started. And I'm like, what you think is a sustainable life now is going to be different to the end version of you, the version of sustainable life. Your version of sustainable right now is you giving yourself an excuse or a reason to go, it's a bit hard this. I'm just going to have this cookie because it's sustainable. I don't want to deprive myself. It's like the similar thing. It's like every time I want to not do the work to try and build my business, I go into watch Netflix because I want a sustainable business. And you start to see these languages and these things crop up time and time again where I hear people talk and they're not actually sure of the things they're doing that are self-sabotaging, but I hear the language and I go, there's something. You just haven't told me it yet, or you're not even admitting it to yourself yet.
Yeah. What will means, like, I will do this. When people say that, it's scary as hell. It's scary. What will means is I have to jump off this cliff. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have to jump. All of the other possibilities that are here, I got to jump off the cliff, and they're not coming with me. I'm jumping towards one possibility. I'm cheesecake factoring it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm doing. That is so scary. We rather talk about it than actually do it. We love to talk about our intentions. We love to talk about our plans. It's so fun to talk about the plan and create the plan. But then when it comes to action, we're like, no, I'm cool. What's going on Instagram?
Yeah.
It scares us because it's so unknown. It's so uncertain. It's so anxiety provoking. There's so many uncomfortable emotions that come with jumping off that cliff. It's like what Steve Harvey says, he says, once you jump, your parachute will not open right away, right? You're gonna skin up your knees or something like that, right? You're gonna hit them rocks, is what he says. And that's real. Most of us don't want to hit them rocks. I always encourage people to read biographies. And when you read a biography or an autobiography of a successful person, 1/3 trials, 1/3 tribulation, 1/3 triumphs. And it's up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. It's the law of rhythm, right? The law of rhythm decrees that night follows day. Tide goes out, tide goes in. Like life just it's an up and down kind of thing. Most of us, we want a flat line the whole time. We don't want to do the downs. And sometimes we don't feel deserving and worthy of the ups. So we just stay where we are. And that's a choice that you make, or you can make another choice and just embrace the discomfort of it all.
The failures are often the things we learn the most from, right? I had the biggest failures I have are the things I resonate as they are the moments where I realize either this is not as bad as I thought, I can push forward, or the things that made me have a big change in my life. What was, you feel free if you don't want to answer this, but what was the biggest failure that you think has propelled your business forward?
That's a great question. What's the biggest failure? I don't know if there's been a biggest failure that has propelled my business forward. I would say this, because honestly, I haven't had that many business failures. My only business failure, like big failure, was Jerf Bar. And I think that could have been a big deal if we stuck with it. I just didn't like my business partner and I weren't getting along very well. So anyway, I would say my biggest failure was quitting YouTube and like deleting all of my social media stuff like back in 2011. And I think that was the thing where I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to personal training. I want to go back to an anonymous life where nobody knows me and nobody stops me at Whole Foods to talk about gluten. Like I just want to just go back to my old life, right? And I think that was my biggest failure, because after about a day or two, I was like, that was stupid. Like that was stupid, Sean. Don't do that ever again. Now I gotta upload all my videos again. I'll piss off all my subscribers and this, that, and the other. And so I think that was the big failure on my part, because I got to feel like I got to feel quitting, I just don't want to be a quitter. And, in that moment, I was like, 5 years from now or a year from now, if you go back to personal training, you're going to freaking hate yourself. You're going to hate yourself. Because number one, I didn't love personal training. And number two, I was always going to wonder, like, what could have happened? Yeah. And looking back to where I was living at the time and what I was doing at the time, the life I was living at the time and the apartment I was living at the time, you walk out, it's downtown San Diego, you walk outside, it smells like pee and all of that stuff. Like I would have still been living that life, as opposed to like living in a beautiful home with a really cool dog and a nice view and every book I can read and really cool friends and all of that stuff. You get to choose your future. And in that moment, I was choosing to go back to the past, and that's weak. You know what I'm saying?
It's choosing the uncertainty of freedom again, right? It's a similar thing like that. I'm in that crossroads now in a similar way that you maybe were at the time. Well, I still do a bit of one-to-one training and I've loved it for 10 years. But when you're 21, 22, 23, you can throw all yourself into, a basement gym and the gym floor. And then you get to, early 30s and you start to go, right, there's more to life than this artificially lit air-conditioned gym. And I'm sort of in that space now. It's like, right, let's see where I can go and start to move myself into a position that allows me more freedom and allows me to be something that I can apply myself to even better. And I think that really resonated with me in that essence. And I think that, there's something I take from this podcast. It's certainly that that little story right there. So I'm very, very glad I asked that.
Cool. I'm glad you did as well.
So for just to close off, to allow you to walk your dog, tell people a little bit about what you're doing now, from the Boss Brain method, to Money Matters course. What are you working on right now, and how can people get in touch with you?
Well, you can learn more about me at SeanCroxton.com. I'm on Instagram at Sean Croxton, though I very seldom post on Instagram. I got a love-hate relationship with Instagram. That's a whole other story. I got podcasts, got the Quote of the Day show. That's on all podcasting platforms. I got my mindset coach, where you just learn a lot of stuff that I teach in my programs for free. But what I'm doing right now is pretty soon, I'm just wrapping up the first cohort of Boss Brain Method. And so what it's for is coaches who have taken multiple online marketing courses and haven't really used them, haven't taken any action, sometimes haven't even finished them, just haven't been able to move the needle in their businesses from the marketing strategy perspective. If you're not doing the marketing stuff, it's probably because you got some mindset stuff going on, typically around being seen, being heard, being criticized, jumping into the discomfort that we talked about today. And it's been fantastic. I have 25 coaches in that program, and 24 of them are creating video content, audio content, creating reels and doing Facebook Lives. And we've been able to do that not just through the mindset things, but also through business strategy, such as like mastering their messaging. Yesterday, we had a workshop on writing their copy for their websites. We have other workshops on YouTube, the best practices for YouTube, podcasting. What else do we have in there? It's loaded. Launching your products with a live event, a live online event, or with a webinar. It's really loaded. So not only do you learn the mindset stuff, but you also get to master the marketing part of it from a base level. And what I mean by that, just really quickly, is a lot of people are like trying to create an online business, and they don't really know who their market is. They don't know who their niche is. They don't know who their messaging is. So we nail that down first. And once you get your messaging right, then you get clearer on your content. You can write your website very easily because you know who you're talking to. So instead of talking to 4 different avatars at the same time, you're writing copy for this one person that you want to help. And so we always start with the messaging. We'll always start with that moving forward. And it's just been dope. We got 3 more weeks of it left, and it's been very rewarding. It's been very hard teaching this for the first time, but it's been very rewarding to see how far these 25, mostly women and a few guys, have come in the last 8 to 9 weeks.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting course. I can certainly vouch for the importance of improving your message. Obviously, we got on a call, and the time difference worked slightly in my favor this time. Last time, 1 a.m., getting up, booking in a consult with you to go through the niche and my message, which was certainly really valuable to do that. And I have watched it back, and my dragging myself and my eyes open from a nap to try and get here for 1 a.m. But it's definitely, I can certainly vouch for the work that you do. So thanks you again, man. This has been another fantastic interview. I think this has been as valuable, if not more, than the last one. And I think people will get a lot of that out of it. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very much, Simon.